after transitioning from the junior secondary school. So about 1 million candidates are expected to be joining various schools nationwide. But that number may likely be lower due to issues arising from, school fees as well. Parents continue to declare the high cost of living and just the cost of admitting a learner. We also had a situation where a number of learners and guardians particularly decried the fact that, their learners have been taken to far-flung schools and day schools, and yet, your student is just nearer. So if you're from Nairobi County and then your child is placed in Narok, for example, in Narok Day School, how are they going to survive? And they're changing as well. So it's been quite a vigorous process, but at the same time, there's been a debate around it that was, I'd say, reincarnated by former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, saying, a majority of learners should go to schools closer to them, to their home counties, rather than joining schools which have largely been termed as national schools, accusing especially leaders from northeastern Kenya of hoarding and mismanaging the national government CDF funds, and says this is a region that has, been able to have allocated money about more than 900 billion shillings since the start of devolution about 13 years ago. So what's fair, what's unfair? That's the discussion we'll be having this morning. Let me introduce my guest joining me on set. On my immediate right, I'm joined by George Ngaira, who's a political commentator. Asante sana Ngaira for your time this morning. Thank you for having me. Good to have you. Next to him is Moses Kimanzi, who's a political analyst as well as a lawyer. Asante sana Kimanzi for your time, and karibu.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Happy New Year, gentlemen. This is the first time we're meeting this year of 2026. And it's just the start of the year, but feels like we've lived it long enough, especially just what is happening currently. But let's begin on matters education before we can talk about ODM party and what is going on. Kimanzi, I'll start with you. The Constitution talks about the right to education for every single person and every single learner. With the state of education, really, in terms of talk about capitation, the delays the government has made with the capitation, the cost of living, the cost of a learner accessing, school fees. Do you feel that we've achieved that with this new constitution? Because education was one of the issues that was devolved. Are we there yet?
No, we are not there yet. And I would say education is not fully devolved. What we devolved was basic education. That's what is with the counties. And the other facet of education was left as it were. So the central government controls the larger part and bit of education because it's the one that hires teachers through the Teacher Service Commission. It's the one that gives capitation to schools.
Yeah.
It's the one that gives policy directives as far as how schools should be managed and all that. So I would not really say that we have devolved education, but what I would say is that we have just rebranded 844. I mean, this first cohort will tell you that not every student will join a cluster 1 school. So that means that whatever you are being meant to believe, that every learner is uniquely different, every learner will pass, it's not necessarily the case.
All right.
Yes.
I mean, that doesn't sound quite promising, does it?
Well, it doesn't. To have a look at the whole issue wholesomely, but I can say that the idea behind CBC was good. The competence-based curriculum or competence-based model of education. It was a very well thought-out idea. However, the implementation should have been gradual and should have factored all the stakeholders and input from especially the education stakeholders, because a lot of gaps were left right from when it started. There was a problem with when we had the first grade 7, there was no proper guideline from the curriculum development. There were no textbooks available with the sellers and all that, and so let's just say it's some teething challenges, but it's something that we need to really improve and work on.
Yeah. Ngaya, at this point, this may be the first cohort that is joining senior secondary school, but essentially CBE has been there for a number of years now. Shouldn't we have gotten over the teething problems at this particular point?
You know, it's true that actually we, thank you for having me, Cynthia.
You're
Happy New Year once again.
Yeah.
It's true that indeed we should have worked on the basics that CBE needed to be able to work properly as it stands today. And I think we've said on this show many times that there are basics that government was supposed to look at. One of them was the physical infrastructure that is needed. For example, 10,000 or 11,000 schools across the country. What is the government needed to have defined? What is the physical infrastructure that was needed to support the system? Secondly, I also told you some time back that we need also, the government should have looked at the human infrastructure, you know, the teachers and the support staff that were needed for this program, so that that becomes the foundation upon which you build this new CBE system. Because it's impossible to talk about CBE without a good infrastructure, physical infrastructure. It's very difficult to talk about CBE without the required human infrastructure, that is the capacity of the teachers and the people who are partaking in that process. And also it's very difficult for us to implement the CBE program because of the involvement of the parent in the same program. Most of the people were not quite prepared. You know, some teachers, some parents have been saying, you know, I'm not a teacher, but I'm paying teachers to teach my students, but I'm still being given responsibilities, you understand? Yeah. Because they didn't quite prepare them, and people were in a rush to be able to run this program. Never mind, it was a good program because when you look at the context of why we had to transition from 844 to CBE now, it's because we believe that as children, and for those who are parents, will know that children are gifted differently. And therefore it's possible that you can have a child who wants to be an academic, and then the other one who's very talented and can become the next football superstar. And with that in mind, then indeed it was right that we can then be able to create an education system which allows then a child to be able to partake in what is good in. There's no doubt about the foundation of that idea of the CBE. But government has struggled with the question of tackling those three most important issues. That's why you have schools which do not have the number of classes that require to be able to set this program.
Yeah.
Some of them, you have schools that do not have the kind of facilities that are needed, particularly for the senior high schools, which then are specialized schools. That's why there's the jostling of going to national schools, because we have schools deep there in Mandera that do not have even a laboratory. How do you say that I'm a STEM student and I'm reporting at Mandera High? It becomes a very difficult process. So I agree that the idea has always been good. I think CBE is the right program for the Kenya of tomorrow, so that we can be able to compete in the world market. But in government, just like it's done for very many years, Cynthia, is that they failed to actually put the priority of the common man in place. Because if they had done so, then government would have, for example, done a logistics and say, we want to take care of 10,000 schools. We need to make sure these schools can be able to access certain fund as one which you can consider, say, infrastructure fund, and say 10,000 schools times 100 million, so we need about 100 billion shillings. We are going to sink 100 billion shillings in 10,000 schools, so that they can be able to ensure they have laboratories, chemistry lab, they have libraries, so that students can go to library schools. They have extracurricular activities, facilities that then can allow students to be able to become what CBE is saying. CBE is saying that, Cynthia, you can be a good volleyballer, and you don't necessarily need to be a good mathematician. And if that be the case, then your school that you went to needs to have good valuable facilities, so that then you can transition from high school to professional volleyball, maybe play for the Volleyball Premier League, for the Volleyball National League, and maybe play at the World Cup, because the Kenyan volleyball team is always in the World Cup. Anybody who succeeds in that space is somebody that can become somebody. So I agree with you that indeed the new CBE system has had challenges, but it's just because of the consistent failure of government to be able to understand what they needed to do, or just because we're invaded by corruption. Because I believe this government understands what CBE needs to require, what CBE requires to succeed.
Right. And Kimanzi, Angara has raised important questions on the fact that, this is quite a demanding curriculum because they are specialized. If somebody is going to do an aviation path, they need to go to a school that may be able to facilitate an aviation course or an aviation subject and have an aviation teacher that has specialized in that. And that's where the capitation comes in, doesn't it? Because we've had issues with the 844 system where schools continue to suffer because the government has delayed with disbursements, and that's a battle that the former Budget and Appropriations Committee Chair Ndindi Nyoro has picked. And so with the CBE now, is it going to be more demanding that the government needs not fail when it comes to disbursing capitation to schools?
Yes, thank you, Cynthia. So that is a fact. If there are two areas that the government cannot afford to joke with, one of them is healthcare and the other one is education. So regarding education, we won't even say necessarily that the problem is a capitation issue.
Yeah.
We just rushed into implementing something when we were not fully prepared for it. I'll give you an instance. If you look at most universities that offer education, they were just offering a Bachelor of Education Arts and Sciences.
Yeah.
For example, now in CBE, physical education is going to be a pivotal point, but we do not have enough teachers for that. That's not that's not a discussion that people are prepared for. In fact, now the people who are actually undertaking that subject will be very marketable in the near future.
Right.
But now you see, far-fetched from talking about aviation, a basic course like physical education, we do not have enough teachers for it. So, just like Gaira said, we needed to have first thought of the human capitation first. We need to have thought about the labor, what it would cost to train teachers in certain aspects that were necessary for implementation of CBE.
Right.
And then now, transitioning would have been a little bit easier. The discussion of where to domicile the senior school, whether in the primary or in the former high schools, that should also have been a discussion that was concluded a long time ago, and plans made. Because again, we have a lot of duplicating roles. Now, you don't know whether classrooms are supposed to be done by the MCA, or they're supposed to be done by the MP, or they're supposed to be done by the governor, or they're supposed to be done by the central government. I mean, we needed to have such a clear policy framework that would have made sure by the time the CBE is rolled out, we have at least classes in place. We have all the necessary infrastructure required and needed for the implementation of the same.
Right.
So now you realize that we are just gambling. We do not know whether school A has X facilities or Y facilities. We do not even know their capacity and whether they can accommodate all the students.
I mean, that's a big word, gambling.
Yes.
At this
Yes. So it's just an issue of wait and see. But I think that the government should have been more prepared. Especially now, they should learn this year with what is happening, because we'll have the first cohort of grade 10s. So come next year, if we experience the same confusion, then it will be a bit not okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Ngaira, with the capitation issue, Kimanzi says the problem may not be on capitation.
Yeah.
So the big question will be, why would Ndindi Nyoro pick up that particular fight and says he's going to mobilize parents to walk into key offices to demand for money to be sent to schools?
It's because the ideal situation is then we have to work on funds so that those funds can be able to give the physical infrastructure that we need within the CBA system. We also need funds to hire more teachers so that we can be able to have the human infrastructure that's needed for that system. We also need to have training programs for parents so that there can be activation either through the PTAs, the Parent Teachers Associations, what we used to have back then. because then it's able to assimilate, to aggregate parents within schools to be able to understand what is the role that they play within the new CBE system. And therefore, for us as a people, and particularly what he's saying in as far as the education sector is concerned, is that then we need to look at what are the obstacles that are being faced in that particular region, and they all boil down to funding. Because funding, and then how do you manage the expenditure of those funds? Because then even President today can come up and say, okay, I've agreed, and I think we're going to put 10,000 primary schools which have both JSS and the junior primary school, and say we're going to set a certain amount of funds that are going to go into expanding the capacity of these schools, so that these schools can take in 1,000 students, and these are 10,000 students. Yeah. So 10 million children in Kenya can go to a school with a swimming pool. You know, that is possible if its funding is worked on. Yeah, so I think for me is that it boils down to funding, and therefore there is need that for the government to be able to work on how funds are mobilized for that program, because otherwise we're going to talk for a very long time, but to not be able to see the tangible results, because the program is very good. Yes. All
right. I'd love to drive this conversation now to the former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, who has recently caused a storm on the placements of learners to different schools. And, you know, he was speaking this while on his, let's say, Meet the People tour of Mount Kenya region, and complained that majority of students or learners within Mount Kenya region do not benefit from schools within Mount Kenya region, and they're sent to far-flung schools which may have no access to some of the facilities that schools within Mount Kenya region have. And it caused quite a storm, with some agreeing with him that, you know, if every particular MP has access to NGCDF, then they are at liberty and are required to build schools and ensure that schools are up to par with the standard required, while others felt that that was quite tribal and that it denied learners from other areas an opportunity as well to benefit from schools you know, in other regions. From where you sit, how would you weigh in from what Rigathi Gachagua was speaking about?
Wow. That's a bombshell. I don't even want to be the one to have a nice break on that. However, from where I sit, he raises a very valid point of what do MPs do with the NGCDF. All right? And I want to give you a scenario of how it was some years back versus now. During our time, there were only 7 public universities. I don't know whether you know that. And that means every year, the system used to assimilate only 10,000 students. That would cut off the entry grade point to around B constant. Can you imagine you have a B minus and you cannot get a direct placement to university? So what happened then was that we had only 7 public universities, as opposed to now, a student who has scored a C+ is assured of a direct entry into university. Yeah. So the point that I wanted to raise there was the expansion that has happened over time. Now, coming to what the former DP said, of course, when you tour the Mount Kenya area, you realize that they have invested heavily in education. You realize that some of the best schools are domiciled there. A good number of the national schools are there, and they are well equipped. Case in point is when you look at the county of Murang'a, and particularly the constituency where Ndindi Nyoro comes from. That is Kiharu. And you realize that he's investing massively in the infrastructure of schools. And I had just seen someone tweet, I think yesterday or the day before, that Ndindi Nyoro should show us the results of the schools that he has built. And then from where I sit, I was wondering, is it the work of Ndindi Nyoro to ensure that parents, I mean that teachers teach, or it's his work to ensure that development is done, to ensure that the infrastructure is in place? So that's his place And therefore, it's the work of another person to ensure that the students actually utilize the resources that they have been allocated, and that the schools that have been beautified and all the infrastructure and the equipment have been put in place. Now it's the work of the students, the teachers, and the parents to ensure that good grades come out of that. So when we look at a person who has enjoyed a primary school that has all the facilities, and then you send them in a far remote area that doesn't have the required facilities, I think that's a valid point that we need to think about as a country.
Right.
However, of course, because it was said in a political tone, of course it will have the setback and the comeback that it has had, the backlash, because it's a political statement, and of course it is likely to be interpreted as a tribal undertone and all that. But deep down, you and I and every Kenyan knows that what he's saying is the truth.
Right.
We've seen on social media some of the schools. I mean, you'd wonder whether that's a junior school, whether it's a kindergarten, and you'd wonder what the NGCDF allocated there does, because we've had allocation, massive allocation of NGCDF from, I think, the year 2003. We are in the year 2026, and I think the discussion of building schools should not arise at this moment.
Right.
I mean, if we want to develop into a first world country, those are not things we should be discussing now.
Singapore.
Yes, if we are having the Singapore dream in quotes, then we should not be discussing that at this particular point in time, because we should be having enough schools. We should be having schools that are equipped all over the country, and we should even have a standard model of how to build those schools and to make sure they're equipped. You even wonder, some of these leaders, when they say they are going for benchmarking, what do they benchmark and what do they come to implement? You see a lot of questions, because if you look at the investment that we have invested in our leaders and the output we are getting, of course we are getting a raw deal. So in conclusion, I would say that every area needs to be at par infrastructure wise, and all the schools should have at least the basic the basic facilities. It is wrong for an area to boast of a school that doesn't have. It's like now saying that this is a studio, but you don't have any recording equipment. So how will it become a studio? You know. So we need to improve more, because I want to believe that every member of parliament receives a significant amount of CDF, and the constitution has laid down what that money should be used for, how it should be utilized, and maybe it's time we even have a conversation on who really should manage funds for schools and education purpose, because I think that model is failing. Is it about time we harmonize education funds into just one kitty? Yes, absolutely. That would be my take. And of course, it should not be handled by any politician. That's my take, because they have failed us continually. All right. Yes. Gachagua at the same time as well has, talked about the northeastern Kenya, leaders. And when we come back after the break, we'll be speaking about what this means, and why northeastern really? Because I believe there's a huge chunk of members of parliament from other regions who may not have developed the areas as much as Ndindi Nyoro, but they're not receiving the same, I'd say, fight with Rigiji as northeastern Kenya's MPs have. So we'll have that conversation when we return after the break. Keep talking to us across our feedback lines, and I will be able to sample your feedback when we return.
State of the Nation, we're taking a bit, array of activities on the roads, as well as different, parents with boxes and mattresses within town. So be on the lookout for that. But before the break, we were talking about the former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua and how he's picked up a fight with northeastern Kenya leaders.
Yeah.
And he got the attention of northeastern Kenya leaders. I'd love to sample a message from Senior Counsel Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi, who was responding and says Gachagua is unapologetically a Kikuyu supremacist and a tribalist class A. But he makes a valid point when he calls out leaders from northern Kenya and tells the truth about them and the fact that the leaders steal from their people. The leaders can't account for 1 trillion shillings given to them since devolution in 2013. The leaders have not built world-class institutions like schools or hospitals. The leaders, include MCAs, are all domiciled in Nairobi and have homes, wives and children only in Nairobi and none in northern Kenya. And the big question will be, why northeastern Kenya leaders? I mean, majority of members of parliament may fall short as well from the standard that they're supposed to be at in terms of how they've utilized the NGCDF money, how they've managed it, have they built schools, have they built roads, but why in particular northeastern Kenya?
I think, Cynthia, northeastern is very critical because when you look at the history of our country over the years, with what has been considered as a marginalized region, northeastern people have been. I actually got a chance because my father at one point worked there for about 5 years, and I used to go through Wajir every time, Marsabit, Turubi, Sololo in that area, so I'm very familiar with it. And those people have been victims of severe marginalization by governments and governments after governments. Cynthia, the first time I went to Alliance High School, I could not believe the comparison between Alliance High School and my local high school at home. And it's not just the name, but the infrastructure and the kind of programs that are there. And to imagine that both students were Kenyans living in the same area, you wouldn't want to say that this is the kind of students you'd expect to perform in the same way. Because the attitude is correct, the infrastructure is correct, the kind of education programs are correct. You are there, you are a Form 4 student, but you're thinking of how you will proceed to MIT somewhere in the US. For somebody that is living in a village like my humble school at Spala Primary School in Mobia East constituency in Bungoma County, there is no kid who would be thinking that I'm going to this Spala Secondary School and for me I'm going to MIT. And that's where the problem begins from, because then it means then that region needs to catch up. And so when you have a situation where now we have funds which have been devolved to those counties, and then in the specific context of Mandera County, which has received over 120 billion shillings over the last maybe 12, 13 years of devolution, and then not to be able to see any particular infrastructure as far as education is concerned, it raises questions. And I think even though we accept that there has been a long history of marginalization, that's why they even were able to create what you call the Marginalization Fund. It's there because Kenya appreciates that indeed it's true that some regions, for whatever reasons, it could be political or just nature, that government forgot them. And so they were never able to get the kind of support that you've gotten to see, because for a very long time, all Kenyans had to come to Kiambu to get a degree. You understand? You had to come to KU, come to JKUAT, and so the big trips from Mandera, from Kakamega, from Mombasa, we all had to come to Kiambu for you to get a degree holder. It's something that maybe might have not been very comfortable for a lot of people, but I thank God that Kibaki government and governments that has followed after that have been able to expand that access to university education, that now we have most of the counties, I think, with the exception of maybe 3 to 5 counties where you do not have national universities, but now to a large extent we have universities within the counties. So it becomes very easy to pick up the northeastern region, because for a very long time it had actually been marginalized for a very long time. And so when it comes to catching up, everybody's expecting, Cynthia, if every day you are the last one in class, other people might ignore the front runners and the middle runners. They'll be praying that one day also Cynthia can pull up his socks so that he can be able to catch up with the rest. And I think it becomes an easy prey for classification, the way Gachagua has done. But he brings in some very valid points. And I've been saying this for a very long time, that if I'm to create a manifesto for 2027 and I'm a politician or somebody that wants to run government, is that standardization of the education infrastructure and education programs must become a basic need. That this country must decide that we're going to invest in that sector, because Cynthia, if we do not develop the human infrastructure, then we cannot have a developed country. Because it's human beings that actually develop countries. If you do not develop the people, then you're not able to develop the country. And I think that becomes very critical, that we invest that, so that you can go to For me, the first time I went to Alliance High School, I was in standard 8, and I was in a school called Lugulu Boarding. And because it was a top school, and our principal then, our headmistress then at that particular time, was working very closely with the principal of national schools, because it was a school that was constantly contributing a huge number of students that used to go to the top schools. So they made it a habit that they would do what you'd call a mentorship program. And so the principal of Alliance High School at that particular time, fortunately, was also from Bungoma County, the Christopher Haemba, for a long time principal of Alliance School, would come to our school, and had the privilege of, because he would come and then they would meet what we used to call the top students of the class. And so we had what we used to have called the first class, which had 30 students. I happened to be next 29, the last among the first. And so we had a chance with him, and you know, he would tell us that I'm expecting you next year. So it sticks into the mind of the student that from here, I'm being expected somewhere else. It's only that because Alliance High School also has a capacity issue, because if it's going to admit 1,000 students of the best of Kenyans, if you take 7 regions and maybe even 47 districts and divide by 1,000, then it means every district can bring maybe 5 or 10 students. It becomes very hard to be able to fit in students in those schools. So then you get the kind of struggle that we are facing currently, where you have 20 of these 30 national schools, and everybody has chosen to go to those schools. And I think the quickest cure for that for government has been that I hope we can prioritize education, Cynthia, so that we can do what is called benchmarking. What is it that makes Alliance High School perform? Is it the infrastructure? Is it the physical infrastructure that the school has, which means the amenities and the facilities the school has, or is it the human infrastructure? Do they have the best teachers? And what consists of a best teacher? Can we be able to reproduce that at Friendsful Kamsinga in Bungoma High School, or can we do that in Kwale High, so that students in Kwale do not have to travel 400 kilometers to get that good facility? They can still be able to meet this facility at Kwale High School, or the same can be met maybe at Meru School or something like that.
Right.
That's the challenge that we've had. So I think Gachagua is just trying to raise issues, because if that is done, then we'll be in a situation, and I think the best level would have been even the sub-county level, because we are talking 350 sub-counties. The government can decide to standardize national schools in such a way that in each of the sub-county, we must be able to have a national school, so that then we do not have the kind of jostling, because Gachagua is right when he says that what happens to the local students, because the institution is within their school. It might have been looked from a tribal angle, and the perception is that Gachagua is looking at it as a Kikuyu, and he's talking about Kikuyus and things like that, which is politics. But I think he raises the issue of capacity in the other areas. And I think you've seen the debate that is on social media. People have been saying, when you don't have national schools in your school, and truth is we have national schools, I think, in every county now. But then they do not meet the kind of facilities and the continuous investment that has been done to these other schools, so that when you go to Machakos School, and it's considered a very old high school, that has told, there are people whom you can say, this is a lawyer that came from Machakos High School. So everybody in Machakos School, in Machakos County, would want to go to Machakos School. And that applies even to the areas where we've come from. Kakamega, we talk of Government African School of Kakamega. So I think you're right when you say it has raised eyebrows in as far as how former Deputy President Gachagua has addressed himself, but it also raises an issue. It raises an issue of standardization.
All right, gentlemen, I'd allow us to switch this as well to matters, politics, just a little bit before we wrap up the show, away from education to the politics within ODM party. And I know, George, you are a life member. I don't know if you still are, but you'll be telling us about what's going on in ODM party. But Kimanzi, just from the outlook of how 2026 started, and 2 key figures in ODM, the Nairobi Senator Edwin Sifuna, who also doubles up as the Secretary General, as well as the Minority Leader in Parliament, Junet Mohammed, who also doubles up as Suna East Member of Parliament, and the verbal exchanges they've had in terms of what happened in 2022 and the blame game, what happened to the agents' money that was given out. But is that the issue? Is the agents' money really the issue of this bickering and back and forth? And we can see factions. There's a factioneering. There's this side and there's that side. But is it really about the agents' money?
Just before I get to that, allow me to just give a conclusive remark on what we were talking about education. And I won't fail to say that as a country we need to awaken and realize that education is a pivotal point if we really have to progress. So I understand what the former deputy president cries about. We have students from Kiambu who, for example, had 68, 70 points.
Yeah.
They couldn't get a place at Alliance. They couldn't get a place at Mangu. They couldn't perhaps get a place at the Nairobi schools, the Akina Mary Hill and the St. Francis, and they consider those their local schools.
Yeah.
So it's incumbent upon the government to really ensure that every sub-county or every constituency has a grade 1 kind of national school, so that we don't start fighting over. I mean, we have students who had very good points called to not very good schools, if I may say, and maybe the parents do not have the willpower to fight, or they do not know who is who to ensure that their children get to their deserving schools. But I would say that the point, even though it was brought from a tribal angle, it's a very valid point. We really need to see what the other regions are doing, and especially the northeastern. You know, for a long time, as Ngaira said, it had been considered a marginalized area. It is considered an arid area. Even teachers who are sent there, they are given very serious hardship allowances, right? We have something called the equalization fund, over and above what every constituency receives, and all the other funding. We have different set of funding for the supposed marginalized areas. So what have they done with those funds? What have we done? What can they show that surely after investing with you or investing in you for X amount of years with this amount of money, these are the results that we can see? Clearly, that is not in place. So it's a discussion that we really need to have as a country. Now, switching back to the political angle where you asked, there is a certain tree, a proverbial tree in Swahili that says, if it doesn't do well, inasingizia jua. So I do not really think that the agent's money was an issue. But now, we are looking at a potential crack, a very serious crack in ODM. And that is why we are seeing the back and forth and the throwing back towards. We need to understand that ODM was Baba. And when Baba left, may his soul continue resting in peace, sometime last year in October, then the party died with him. We only have the organs now.
Just on paper.
Just on paper. And if care is not taken, in the next 5 years, we might not really have
next year.
ODM. No, I'm just being lenient and giving them 5 years. But the truth is, if things continue that way, then we're going to have a problem in ODM.
This factioneering, it's almost like the old members as well as the new members.
Yes.
In terms of, you're looking at Ali Hassan Joho, you're looking at Gladys Wanga, and these are people who were there from the conception of ODM. And on the other hand, you're looking at the same more younger members who are also coming up. I mean, with this factioneering, really, where does it now leave other members who may not really know what to do?
First of all, we have 3 factions in ODM. 3.
Okay.
We have factions that believe that that ODM was an Odinga kind of party, and they strongly believe that an Odinga heir should carry forward the party, because those are the people who would now identify with the ideals of Mzee and all that. And then we have the people I would call the status quos. Those are now the Gladys Wanga that you are talking about, and that cohort. Then we have now the young tax, whom we can now start calling the reformists, who are now the Babu Owinos and the Edwin Sifunas, who believe that the party should have been handed over to the younger generation. That's a discussion that the party needs to have. Because one of the things that, even though nobody knows when their time is coming, one of the things that Baba did not explicitly do was to give policy direction. Even when he was vying for the AU seat, on what would be the criteria for handing over the party. Who would he hand over the party to?
Yeah.
How would it be? That was a card that was closely kept in his chest. And now now what we are seeing are the outcomes of not having done that. It's like a tycoon who never shared his property, and then the tycoon dies, and the children are all over fighting for the inheritance and all that. So at some point, it's good that you also understand that for an organ as big as ODM party, for the continuity, there needs to be a plan for succession. It's an uncomfortable truth. It's an uncomfortable place to discuss, but it's good to always have that idea that one day this generation will not be there. How will we hand over to the next generation? And how will it look like? How will it affect the general party? Because the ones who are running it versus the ones who are now supposed to take over, what are their ideals? How will they carry on the mantle of those that started and all that? So that is a discussion that was not there, and that is why we are having the bickerings that we are having right now.
So it's not about the agent's money.
It is not about the agent's money, clearly.
Yes. All right, Gaia, from your point of view, we're having the Central Management Committee meeting today in Coast, where some of the leaders, top leaders, will be meeting in Mombasa to just sort of quell these tensions that we're seeing. Is it beyond repair? Is it repairable for this particular, back and forth that we're seeing between the factions within ODM?
Absolutely not, Cynthia. And for somebody like me, and I've put it on record here many times for almost 100 shows, that I've been a life member of ODM, and it's a party that I really hoped that does well, because we invested our time and money in that party. Our prayer was that this party can be able to survive individuals, so that even when Baba leaves, we'll be able to transition to the next phase. Very unfortunate that we are here now where ODM had not quite structured that transition very well. And so everybody now in ODM, the challenge that we have in ODM right now, Cynthia, is that Junet cannot fire Sifuna. Sifuna cannot fire Junet. Nobody can fire anybody as it stands today.
That's the issue.
Because the person who hired them is not there. Until it comes back, which might never happen. Then it means nobody can fire them, unless if people just part ways. And so ODM finds itself in a very precarious situation, because at some point, and there are many times, because I attended many ODM events, and there are times we discuss party decisions, and I remember in 2017, after the election, and we went to do a party surgery on what the outcome of the election. We went to Kilaguni, in Manzoni, over there, and we were discussing about the party future, and we were saying that ODM has reached a time now. We must now look at the next phase of ODM, because we didn't even believe Baba would vie in 2022, because he'd already run 4 times. So we're like, maybe they might not run. So when it comes to thinking about the future of ODM, we'd look at what the future looks like. And the idea was then the structures had to be strong, and we need to create a culture where ODM has a continuous, has a structured organs within the party that protect party decisions. ODM should try its best that every 4 years it can be able to change its scale. It can be able to go back to grassroots elections and keep renewing the structure of the people in the foundation, who are the foundation of the party. And we had all these big plans about ODM. Unfortunately, they just never get implemented. And so then by bad luck, then we lose Raila Odinga along the way. And so we are where we are now today. Today, as the party meets, the Central Management Committee, which is the organ that actually creates ideas for the party, which then are run through the National Executive Council, then they run through the NGC, and hopefully they're taken to NDC, is a very critical organ in terms of proposal. It would be interesting to see some of the proposals that would come from the Central Management Committee, because people are saying this is the committee that's going to propose a new SG. A dangerous move, that could very easily affect the structure of the party, because you understand the region with the most and the highest number of elected members in ODM is the Western region. Kakamega County alone has 10 members of parliament, 9 members of parliament from ODM. If you put the other MPs there in the Western region, it's almost 15, 16. Nairobi has some ODM members of parliament who are also from Western, so it's almost 2020. It's more than Luo Nyanza, by the way.
Yeah.
So you didn't want to gamble with such in a country which still looks at politics from an ethnic lens.
Yeah.
And I was just home yesterday, that's why you can say I'm a bit drowsy, and I was coming overnight, and people there yesterday were saying back home that if Sifuna leaves ODM, we are leaving. And these are ordinary people, you understand? So it's a dangerous move. I pray that the party, you ask me whether it's out of control. No, it is very much within control. The party can make a decision that we only need to make one choice in ODM. Can the organs of the party determine the party decisions? Because the legal organs, Cynthia, are structured countrywide.
Yeah.
It's not one person.
All right.
ODM has officials up to the polling station. We actually have 290 constituency chairpersons. That alone tells you that there's somebody in Mandera who's an ODM member. So when somebody shows up at a funeral somewhere in Homa Bay and says, we as the Luo community have made a decision to remain in government, where does that leave the ODM governor in Tana River? Where does it leave the MCA in Lunga at the border there, who's a member of ODM and probably has been in ODM for 20 years just like any other person, you understand? And because of that is why the party created the structure, because the NDC and the NGC brings everybody from across the country. So that then that is put to test in a valid vote, so that Kisumu, Siaya, Bondo and Homa Bay can come and say we want to remain in government. But the other 43 counties can say something else. And in a free democracy where you say the majority wins, it's going to be very hard maybe for certain choices people have made to be achieved legally through the NDC. That's why they do not want to have the NDC. Right. Because in an NDC, Cynthia, it means the MCA of Moyale ward, where I lived for 5 years in Marasibi County when my father worked there, it is almost 700 kilometers from here. Back then, before they had the tarmac from Isiolo, it would take 2 days to get to Moyale. The member of parliament then was an ODM member of parliament, is the current governor of Marsabit County. That place, I know it. It has very strong ODM supporters. When you come up and say that, surely you've not spoken for them. They need to get that chance so that when they can come to a proper NDC and make that decision. So ODM has a chance. And that chance is only one. Can the real party structures make decisions so that the decisions made by the party are the ones that will remain? That one will allow us to get rid of grandstanding and the kind of statements that we get from the outsiders, because we might not end up with the choice that people are currently making from the sideways.
Right.
Yes.
In 2 minutes, Kimanzi, can we speak about the central issue here, which is the broad-based government, whether to stick in government or not? I think that's one of the biggest bone of contention for ODM party, and maybe what's causing this, factioneering within ODM. So what would be a safer option for ODM, in the run-up to 2027, which is actually just next year? Do they stick with William Ruto until 2027? Do they stick with him beyond 2027? I mean, that English that Odinga said, still confuses people, confuses people to date. In 2 minutes, maybe you can speak on that.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. So, actually, that was to be my next point. The decision that ODM needs to make is not exactly what Ngaira has said, even though he's correct. The decision that ODM needs to make is whether they need to stick in government or not. Now, we have, again, 2 large factions in ODM. The ones that believe that they should stay in government, who are particularly now the Luos, and then we have the others. And that's why you are seeing a lot of factioneering. Like now, Joho is threatening to marshal his coastal people to either pull out or stay in ODM if certain things are not observed. And as he has said, ODM also experiences a very large following in Western Kenya. And therefore, how they handle that is also going to, because again, now we are trying to see the leaders, Akina Natembea and all that, who are trying to marshal now the Western region to do what it did in 2002, and that is to have all their votes cast in one basket. It has always been a far-fetched dream, but in politics we say anything is possible. So from where I sit, they find themselves in a very tricky position. One, because let's say had Baba not gone, from where I sit, I think Gladys Wanga was comfortable knowing that she would be fronted as the next deputy presidential candidate, or the running mate for the incumbent president in 2027. Now, I'm not sure whether the party is going to back her or it's going to back someone else. So we are a bit in a confusion mode and in limbo, and that is why you are seeing that that Gladys Wanga and those who are supporting her are fighting hard for them to remain in government, so that they see if that promise that probably they had been given when we were not hearing is fulfilled. Again, we have the young tax, and we have those people who believe that they should not be in government, in broad-based government, and they also have their own supporters. So we will have a situation where they need to have a compromise decision, but it needs to be a harmonized and a united kind of decision, because if they continue like that, it is going to be trouble in paradise for ODM. That is what perhaps I can say.
All right, in a minute as we close it up.
Just in a minute, Angela, I need to say that with or without ODM, with or without UDA, Kenya is at a position where we need to now begin to have a renaissance, where the new young leaders of this country can begin to chart a new path for this country, because the chances are that we're here for much longer than the older individuals, and therefore they have a chance to be able to begin to craft a new foundation upon which this country can be able to be built on. And that's why we're working on a renaissance movement that can be able to build that. And one of those foremost efforts that we're making is to make sure that we're able to get as many young people as possible into parliament and
when
the
you say
county
we, who do
me and among as many other well-meaning Kenyans who want to see this country do well in a fantastic renaissance movement that can be able to bring as many as young people into the organs of government, because simply you can have very good ideas, but if you're not in the right place where the ideas can be implemented, it becomes very difficult for you to be able to achieve that. And for us to be able to control policy and expenditure in government, then it means we need to get as many young people as possible in government, and that can only be done through parliament or the county assemblies. And therefore that decision to be able to push for more and more young people to go to parliament and the National Assembly, so that regardless of who becomes president, he has to come back to parliament, and we have a choice on how that can be able to be partaken, I think is the reason why the renaissance movement is something that we're working on. And lastly, a very big congratulations to our sister Angela Oktoi, who just won her double victories this weekend in the International Tennis Federation. You know, a wonderful lady from our very humble county of Kakamega, Mr. Kimanzi, in Kwesero. She's now on her way into becoming a full-blown professional in the tennis. This is the Serena Williams incoming, and we are hoping that this week, she just won about $10,000 or $20,000 from that level. She's gone up a bit, at least 82 ranks now, and now she's just about to go pro from June. And from that level, she can then begin to feature in the Australia Opens, the amateur version of it. And I think our sister would now be on our way to become an international superstar. And we couldn't have been more proud as the people of Kakamega of what our wonderful daughter from Kwesero is doing. So a big very thank you for her and the work she's done.
I sense some sort of... Anyway, it's okay. We wrap it up at that point, gentlemen. This morning, as we was speaking on the state of the nation, especially within the education sector, as well as within the ODM party. So all these two are actually developing stories, I'd say, that we'll be keeping tabs on what happens in the coastal region after the Central Management Committee, as well as the school's admission to senior secondary school continues for the better part of this week. So we'll be keeping tabs with that. You do tell us, as a parent, as a guardian, if you've got a learner joining grade 10, what is, how is the moment for you? What are you feeling? Are you satisfied with where the learner has gone to? So we wrap it up at that point this morning. On my immediate right, I was speaking to George Ngaida this morning, a political commentator, and Moses Kimanzi, a political analyst and a lawyer as well. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time this morning. I appreciate.
You're welcome.
All right, we close it up at that point. Thank you for watching. Have yourself a good morning.